guys for being on this call and just taking time out of your Friday to give some of our admitted students an opportunity to hear the current student perspective. So we'll start off by, if you could do a little introduction of yourself. If you could say your name, your hometown, the degree program you're in, and a fun fact about yourself. Let's start with Kyle, and then we'll go to Sydney and then Eliza.
Sure. Well, my name is Kyle McDonald. I am a second-year Master of Divinity student. Although this is technically the last day of classes, so I'm wrapping up my second year rapidly. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, but I've lived in Durham for the last going on 4 years now. A fun fact about me is that I play the saxophone. That was my primary instrument in college.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you and share virtual space. My name is Sydney Richards. I am a third-year Master's of Divinity student. Soon I won't be able to say that because I'll be graduating. I'm from Lexington, North Carolina. And a fun fact about me is, I guess I've learned Chinese and Spanish at the same time, but I've been speaking Chinese for about 8 years.
My name is Eliza, and I'm a second year in the MDiv program. My hometown is Santa Rosa Beach, Florida. It's in the panhandle of Florida. And my fun fact is my first job was at a seafood restaurant.
Awesome. Thanks, Eliza. So as you three know, one of the biggest kind of daunting tasks that you have going from being an admitted student to a current student is finding housing. Kyle, would you please answer the question, what is it like trying to find housing when you're not living in North Carolina? What advice would you give to people looking for housing that aren't necessarily close to Durham?
Sure. Well, the first time we came down to Durham was for an admitted students day in February or March, and we did know somebody who lived in what became our apartment complex. So that was helpful to know at least one person who is a current student and say, where do you live? How do you like it? What kind of good spaces are there? They also provided a housing tour, but they at the Divinity School do have housing lists that were available. It was really nice to be able to talk on Facebook to other admitted students and say, hey, where are you looking? Or even just check out a map of the Triangle area. We're kind of right in between Chapel Hill and Durham, which has turned out to be a really nice place for us. My wife is a pastor in Chapel Hill, so it's nice that she's only about 20 minutes away from her church, and I'm only about 10 to 15 minutes away from Duke. It's honestly hard to find a bad location in Durham because you're less than 15 minutes from anywhere. But I would say just talk to people as you can who are here, whether they work at the Divinity School or maybe they're a current student that you know, and then just do some research online. There's a lot of property owning companies who own multiple places that are very reputable.
Thanks, Kyle. Eliza or Sydney, any good tidbits on the housing search?
Yeah, so I found, so there are individual apartment complexes, but there are also companies that own multiple throughout the city. And so I'm with GFC Apartments, and they have I think they have 10 locations, 10 different complexes throughout the Triangle. And so if you do some research and find a company that owns multiple, that'll give you options, because we picked our second place that we looked at under this one company.
Awesome. Thanks, Eliza. Eliza, going with you, there's a lot of different students that are on this journey of discernment when they're thinking about theological education. Some are 100%, yep, this is the school, I'm going there. Some folks are still in that place of searching and figuring it out. What helped you decide that Duke Divinity School was going to be the school you chose to attend?
Yeah, so I applied to Duke and I applied to Candler, and it was about a couple of months. I sat with the decision, and went through a discernment process. And one of the first factors was I didn't want to go through Atlanta traffic every day for school. So that was like one of the reasons. But also, I fell in love with Duke because I knew some people that had come through the program. I had several professors in undergraduate who came to Duke, and I really resonated with how they taught and how they understood and relayed information. And so that was, and I just appreciated them as people and had a lot of respect for them. And they spoke very highly of Duke. And so some of my professors, and I knew a couple of students who had just graduated and became my chaplain at my undergrad. And so just through lots of personal connections, I really felt drawn to that. And Duke is in a beautiful place. And I think that is something that's kind of falls into the background a lot when talking about discernment. But North Carolina it's a beautiful, beautiful place, and culturally I love it. We aren't quite up north, but we aren't quite in the deep, deep south. I just really love where it is in Durham, in the town of Durham. And so those are the things that really drew me to Duke. It was the personal connections and the people that I loved and respected, and where it is. It's gorgeous.
I totally agree, Eliza. Thank you. So, Sydney, you are our senior on this call. You are kind of nearing the end of your time at Duke Divinity School, but along the way, you've made friends and built community. You're also a person that you took the courage and came to school without family or with you in Durham. Can you talk a little bit about how you built that community and made friends as a single person?
Certainly. So I'm a type of person, this is a little backstory, a person that likes to be very, very involved in her community, whether that is church community or where I'm studying and learning, because I truly believe that in order to not only find friends or to be faithful to what God has called us to be as part of being a beloved community, that we have to actually do it. And so for me, it was a little difficult coming right out of undergrad, especially as a student who lives alone. But I jumped right into the community at Duke Divinity, and not in a way of signing up for random things, but I asked myself, what are my gifts? What are my passions? What are some communities that I can be in covenant with rather than just pursuing a hobby? And so I found myself either faithfully working in offices to really jog out and really put to test my theology, whether it was working in the chaplain's office or working for admissions, working in the library. But I've also found myself in different student organizations like Prison Justice Advocacy Group, leading the gospel choir and doing a few things like that. So through those avenues of being faithful to not only hobbies, but things that I felt passionate about, I found family, and I found ways to love and know and serve the Duke community even more. And so that has really been the centrifugal part of my theological education, in just finding family that I wouldn't have had an opportunity to before.
Thanks, Sydney. Now, Sydney talked a little bit about community and finding, your people and the places that help you connect. But Kyle, I'd love to ask you, what kind of resources did you find while being at Duke Divinity School outside of the walls of the Divinity School, maybe at Duke University or in Durham?
Yeah, there's so much, so much. Durham is a flourishing town, and people really are dying to move to the Triangle as a whole. So there's lots to do in the city of Durham, in Chapel Hill, and in Raleigh. And my wife and I have kind of spent a year at least kind of going to each place and figuring out what there is to offer. But even at Duke, there's a ton of stuff to do any day of the week. I've been a church musician, so I was really interested in going to the kind of big Duke Chapel services. They have at least 3 a week, kind of varying styles, and it's really interesting to see those. But they also have like jazz vespers where they'll bring in like Grammy award winning artists and have like a big band up in the chancel of the chapel, which is incredible to be at. They also have music and concerts throughout the week. Duke Performances is a world renowned arts kind of organization that brings artists from all over the world to Duke, which is just fantastic. I love going to sporting events. As a Duke student or spouse, you can get a spouse ID for $25 and get into anything at Duke for free except men's basketball. We went to Duke football games. We went to women's basketball game, volleyball games. It's just so much fun to be at Duke as a grad student because it's just really cool. It's a cool place. You feel like you're at Hogwarts. Even kind of in between Big Duke and the Divinity School, I've been really involved in DITA, which is Duke Initiatives in the Theology and the Arts. There's a big conference in September that brought in poets, artists, musicians, and many more people from around the world, again, that are world-renowned, award-winning artists of all stripes to come in and talk about theology and its intersection with the arts, which is really one of my interests. So it was kind of at the Divinity School, but it also brought in people from all around Duke. And there are things like that that happen all the time. There's a reconciliation conference soon. There's preaching conferences. There's so many things to do at the Divinity School, at Duke, in Durham. It's really just fantastic.
Thanks, Kyle. Now, Kyle talked a little bit about, what it's like to participate in Big Duke, as we call it, but the wider Duke University in Durham. But Eliza, I'd love if you could spend a few minutes and talk about if you have any advice for spouses that are looking for jobs. Sometimes we do come on our own, but oftentimes we are coming to move and go to Divinity School with those that support us. And they need to find jobs too. So any advice would be great.
Yeah. When we came almost 2 years ago at this point, my wife and I were both coming straight out of undergraduate. And Duke, the Triangle has the most PhDs per capita in the entire world. And so my wife, that was very daunting to my wife. And this was our experience. It doesn't mean it'll be everybody's. But she had a really, really hard time trying to find a job. She had a communications degree. She's worked in a couple of churches and that kind of thing, but she really, really struggled. And it took a while to find a job. And so I think going through that experience, I think that my advice would be to start applying as soon as you know that the student is going to come. We kind of made our decision, I think, in April or May. And so I would say around that time, whenever you know for sure, okay, we're going, you're going to go to Duke. I think that your spouse should start applying to jobs immediately and be prepared to move as soon as you graduate or whenever. So I think applying early is number one. And then also, don't be afraid to ask for connections and for help. The way that my wife eventually found a job was through another incoming student first year. Their spouse worked at a temp agency. And so she was able to get an interview because it was through a personal connection. And that made everything, I think, a little bit easier. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to reach out to people in your congregation if you find a church here quickly. Don't be afraid to reach out to new friends that you make when you first come. Literally anyone and say, hey, my wife is looking for a job or my spouse is looking for a job. Do you know of any openings anywhere? And that will make things, I think, hopefully a little bit smoother.
Absolutely. Great advice, Eliza.
I would also jump in there. When we moved here, it was in 2016, and my wife was an incoming Divinity student, and I was not ever planning on coming to Duke, and that's another story in and of itself. But I was kind of a supportive spouse for 2 years while we lived in Durham. I looked at teaching. I looked at being, a church musician. I eventually worked at Starbucks for 2 years, and it was right down the road from our house, which was a really wonderful experience, actually. So I would echo what Eliza said about there's a Duke temp agency. You'll see if you look at Duke's employment listings, you'll see a lot of open positions, but it's really tough to get one of those unless you have an already established Duke connection. But that can come if you're not in the Duke system. It's really hard to get one of those jobs. But once you are in that Duke system, it becomes a lot easier. So we have a lot of student spouses who work in the Divinity School and around campus, and those opportunities are there. There is a thing called Duke List, kind of like Craigslist, but Duke List, that has not just job opportunities, but people selling things and kind of its own market. So I would definitely look at that. I would, again, try to reach out to anybody you might know here to ask for advice or any open positions. But kind of what I did eventually was just seeing what was around our apartment and what kind of local place I could work and flesh out what other things we were interested in doing while we were here.
Thanks, Kyle. That's great advice too. And as Kyle noted, like Duke List is a really great catch-all for a lot of things. I often describe it to folks as the Craigslist for the Duke community. So as Kyle said, you can go there and find jobs. You can look for housing opportunities. Sometimes if a current student or faculty or staff or community member at Duke has a space that they're looking to rent or share with someone, they'll post it there. You can look for even just household items, waffle makers, brooms, all kinds of stuff. Like I've bought a lot of random stuff off of there. And knowing that it's coming from the Duke community just was a level of security and help too. So Duke List could be one of your best friends as you're transitioning into Duke Divinity School. So thanks for dropping that too, Kyle. My next question is for you, Sydney. One of the maybe best and worst parts of being a senior in a graduate program is being able to reflect back on your time. And if you could talk a little bit about your vocational goals and journey through your time in Divinity School. How did things stay the same, and how did things change as you went through your theological education?
Awesome. So for me, sort of kind of like Kyle, I never really thought I would be here at Duke Divinity, let alone graduating 3 years later after coming right out of undergrad. And so for me, I had a supernatural experience with God right before I graduated undergrad. And I applied to Duke very late, and I got in, and I knew I was called to ministry, but not specifically how. But I will say Duke has been kind of like my Ebenezer in ways that it has not been a place that has saved me and told me specifically what to do, but it's been an active site where God has spoken and through faithfully through classes that I've taken, through professors that have mentored me, through spiritual formation, through worship life as well. And so I came to Duke really not having any idea of what I was called to do. And now throughout literally every semester, there were just little nuggets being dropped, integrated in the coursework or through affirmation of professors or preceptors, kind of shining a light on the gift that God wanted me to see. So came in not knowing specifically what I want to do, but now I know that I'm called to preach. I'm called to pastor an academy. So I want to pursue a PhD in homiletics, to be a homiletics professor in a seminary, as well as helping in mass incarceration on the justice side of the church. So that means I will probably also pursue a 1-year LLM program, possibly at Yale or someplace like that. So through field education, through spiritual formation, deep conversations with professors, and the discernment that's built into the curriculum and the coursework and the culture of Duke Divinity, I've been able to be faithful to my call. And so Duke, looking back on my 3 years here, I'm getting emotional, but it has been a place that has been a great gift to me, that has provided a lot of focus and future vocational goals that I know will not only be a blessing to my children, but also a blessing to the world. And so I'm very grateful.
Thanks, Sydney. We appreciate you, and and thankful for the ways in which you have brought wisdom and lots of great things to our community, for sure. My next question and my last question is really for all three of you, so feel led if you would like to answer. Say you're walking down the street and you've got a Duke Divinity School sweatshirt on, and someone stops you and says, "Hey, like, what's a distinctive piece or thing about Duke Divinity School?" What would you say to that person? What do you think is the piece or the activity or the element of the school or the community that makes it Duke Divinity School?
Okay. The thing I usually tell people when I'm giving a tour or talking to a prospective student or to friends or family back home is really just about the community at Duke Divinity. It is a very strong community in so many ways. We're in such a weird time right now in our world, in our just local community. But the people who are involved with the Duke Divinity School are just some of the best people I've met, from professors and preceptors to staff, to the housekeepers, are just wonderful people. But the students as well, who are trying to take care of each other right now, while there are people with families who are students who are trying to figure out, how do I go to class virtually while taking care of three kids, and we have students who are saying, like, here, let me help you out, or let me go to the grocery for you. It's that community that's really coming out, even stronger than I've seen it at times like this. But this is a community that rallies around each other when we need to, and supports each other even in the quote unquote normal times. That says, like, how can we pray for each other? Last summer I did a field ed at a local church nearby. And some of my friends and I just started sending each other the sermons that we were preaching. We didn't have to, we weren't required. But it was something that really meant a lot to each of us, and to hear each other preach, but also to be able to encourage and support each other at a time where we just kind of were dipping our toes into what it was like to be a pastor. And I think that holds true for the whole year, for the whole community.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah, I totally echo what Kyle said about the community, the seeing people beg for one another and share and grieve right now with one another and lift each other up. I'm totally echoing what Kyle said. But I think my number one thing that I would talk about with Duke Divinity School is A, the community, but and B, the field education experience. So the field education experience for me has been the most grounding. We spend a lot of time in the classroom, learning, digesting, memorizing names and facts and dates and places, and all of that is grounded in spiritual work, and I love it. But for field education allowed me to be able to take what we were learning and put it into practice, and really be able to flush out, like, okay, so we learned this, but here's what it looks like in practical application inside. Because I did field education this past year, summer and academic year, at a church in downtown Durham, and it has been the most wonderful experience to be inside of a church while we are going through and learning Bible, church history, theology. All of that has been kind of culminated and into this experience of presiding over funerals or assisting in presiding over funerals, baptism, and what we learned in the classroom about baptism, and then to be able to go and sit with a couple and their 3-month-old and talk about baptism has been the most grounding and enriching, and it has helped me discern how my vocational call. And so for me, the field education experience has been one of the most amazing experiences while I've been here.
Thanks, Eliza. Sydney, any distinctives that feel good and true to you?
I would echo everything that Kyle and Eliza said, but just to kind of tie it together with a pretty bow on top, I would just say I really appreciate every aspect of Duke Divinity, from the learning community to our learning lab of having a house of prayer that is Gibson Chapel, to different groups that you can be a part of that share some same theological truths or beliefs as well. But I will just say that I've appreciated altogether Duke Divinity altogether, because what we learn, we're not just learning abstract things. Our theologies are not just written or spoken, but they're alive. And because they're alive, we're able to live through it. And so that's been one thing that I have really, really enjoyed, seeing that echoed in the culture of our food and faith, in our cafe, all the way down to our First Roots Biblical Orchard group, to the way that we have a free table or offer non-perishable goods for folks that maybe not have food to eat in our lounge. And so I would just say the ways that I've seen theology not just exist, but become alive through the way that we live and serve together with each other. That has been a golden thread that has sewed up my 3 years together, and that has been a true testament of faithfulness for the school.
Thanks, Sydney. I think that's all of you bring so many good, true, distinctive elements. I'm a not so recent grad. Every year I feel older and older, but I graduated from the Divinity School in 2017. And when I got my Master's of Divinity, I felt like one of the distinctives as well was how many things intersect with faith and theology that I never expected to realize. I was born and raised in Blacksburg, Virginia. I had a degree in public policy, and I myself, independently of what was happening around me, knew that politics and public policy intersected my faith identity. But being able to be in a classroom with people who saw what they ate every day as part of their theology, and the music they performed, and the art they made, and the exercise that they did, all these things that are part of the elements of our world and our society that I didn't realize intersected with theology. I feel like me now being an alum, it's helped me meet people and see these are not just professionals in the world that aren't connected to theology, but they're actually connected to theology even if they don't know it. And it's helped me be a better minister for sure. So I just think, as you all have noted, Duke Divinity School is a really special and unique place. And so, wrapping this up, and kind of my last question for you all, as we say goodbye, is you all are sitting at the other end of this story. Those who will be hearing this and listening to this are folks that are saying, maybe I've never visited Duke Divinity School, maybe I've never set foot in North Carolina, maybe I've been there a ton. But what is one piece of wrap up or advice that you would give as we close this time together for these visitors and perspectives and admitted students on why should they come to Duke Divinity School?
I think a piece of advice for the application process and the transition process into coming is to allow patience and grace with yourself. It's a big thing to move sometimes across the country. For others, for me, it was north of the country, and I had never had to pay for parking in my hometown, and so or been to a big university and learned how to do a bus system. So I think, and not only like those transitions, but the transitions with learning how to be a grad student on the online platforms that are being used to turn in assignments and stuff like that and get course readings. It's a lot of transition and it's a lot of newness all at once. And so I would say allow yourself grace and patience in that transition process, in moving, in your first couple of weeks of classes. Just give yourself extra time to rest and to understand things and to read the syllabus, and be patient with yourself in that process. And why you should come to Duke. I mean, it's great. Like, it's fantastic. Like, I mean, it's weird right now, but it's still so good in so many ways. even as we are running into finals week this next week, it is still one of the most formative experiences of my life. And so I want that for any person that feels called to this.
So my word of advice, I would say, is bring all of yourself with you in the fall or whenever classes will begin for you considering COVID-19. Bring all of yourself with you, and don't allow yourself maybe to have clenched hands, to open your hands to receive just as much as you're opening your hands to give. What you have to offer, sharing in your life way, or receiving different things from coursework, all the way to hearing life stories of folks that might just bless you and change your faith walk. So that's what I would say my advice would be. Just don't hold your hands, your body, your mind, any of that, because I truly believe body theology is a thing too. But just don't hold on so tightly or unhealthily tightly to your truths or things that you're sure of before coming to Duke Divinity School. Make sure you have an open hand to receive and also to give. And why Duke? I would say, in that same light, just as you're coming with open hands to receive and give, you're going to be met with open hands to receive and give as well. And so it's a beautiful community where mutual reciprocity happens and faithful reciprocity happens. So you're going to have professors and friends that are going to check up on you and be faithful to pray with you and to check your sermon, to pull you outside and just have some holy moments at a meal over some conference that we had that day, or just some random professor that we have giving a guest lecture. And so that's what I will say. Why Duke is because although you're coming with open hands to give and to receive, you're going to be met with open hands and even open arms as well. So who wouldn't want that to be wanted back?
Yeah, that's really good advice, to kind of hold what you have gently. I think the tighter you want to hold it, the harder it is to hold on. So that's really good advice, Sydney. I would say graduate school is a unique animal, and I would say seminary even more so. There are a lot of people who come straight from undergrad. Not everybody does. I didn't. But seminary is a very different animal than college. College feels like kind of a phase or just kind of a little thing you're doing. Seminary is your life. When we moved here, like, we uprooted everything we had and moved down here, didn't really know anybody. And it does change your life. Like, so expect to be changed in a lot of ways. Who's to say? I wouldn't put good or bad on it, but through field education, I've had some good and some odd experiences, but I have learned a lot through every experience in ways that I never anticipated, through classes and professors who challenged me in ways that, again, I didn't expect. Things that I thought I knew, maybe I don't, and I've learned a lot that I had no idea about. I have discovered parts of my personality and parts of my call that I didn't know were there. But I can see that God was leading me to this, again, in ways that I could have never imagined. But I would say, kind of like Eliza said, like, somebody said, come with your whole self, but know that, like, you will not leave the same, and that's a good thing. Jump in, but be sure to take care of yourself through the journey, whether you're at Duke or somewhere else. This is a life, and it is your life. So, like, you have, this is going to be the most cliche thing I could say, but, like, you have your life. So, like, you don't want to lose it. And when you want to take care of yourself, even when you're preparing to come, Duke is not perfect, but again, and it is challenging, but again, you learn as much through those imperfections and those challenges as you do through the best moments.
Thank you, all three of you. Great answers, and great ways of representing the Divinity School. I know our admissions team is happy to have you, as is the school. Before we leave, big thanks to you guys. I hope that, as I think it was Eliza said, as you run into the next week of finals, that you are affirmed and encouraged in who you are and who God is calling you all to be. I'm going to close us in just a moment of prayer. So if you would pray with me. Dear Lord, I thank you so much for all that you have given each of us. You have, throughout time and history, stood with your leaders and your prophets and those that you have called that don't feel like they're leaders and prophets at the edge of the unknown. The unknown can be that they are about to start divinity school and are trying to figure out what that looks like. The unknown can be graduating and figuring out where you are calling them next. The unknown can be the next week of finals and just being the best academic that they can be. But no matter what that unknown is in that season of transition and questioning, you are a God of consistency. You are a God of faith. I pray that the Spirit will be with all of us, that you will give us the courage that we need, the grace that we need, the patience that we need, but most importantly, the love that we each need to do the good work that we call ministry. Thank you for the church and the many ways that it looks in our world. Thank you for the ways that we are building community, both in person and virtually and everything in between. Be with all of our students, both our current students, but also especially our admitted students as they are thinking about what it could look like to pursue theological education, especially with us here at Duke Divinity School. May all of us each day try to emulate your son just a little bit more and use what we've learned in this time of conversation to do just that. In the Lord's name we pray. Amen.